And we are live. So, welcome to this review of Andy Muschietti's The Flash 2023. I just came back a couple of hours ago from seeing it. Um, it was a lot. It was a lot to talk about. This is a film that has had three different rewrites. It's had six different writers, six different directors. And in a general sense, it felt that way. It felt very uneven. It comes in at a little over 2 hours and 20 minutes or something along those lines. It's a lot to take in. Let me just start out by saying it's not the worst film I've ever seen. And I know that the projections for this film right now aren't looking great, but it wasn't the worst thing I've ever seen. There are worse films out there that have been dragged a hell of a lot less than this one. And I'm watching it play out, and I'm sure you are if you're watching this video play out in real time on social media and on Twitter primarily is where I'm checking it out, where you either think it's really great, but there are a lot of people out there that I think had their minds made up about this film before it even dropped. And I'll be honest, I was one of the people who was just going to stay home and save my money. I kind of had no interest. I've been burnt out on comic book movies. This is the first one I've gone to the theater to see since Spider-Man No Way Home, which was a great movie. But to be perfectly honest, I've only watched Spider-Man No Way Home the one time. I own it on Blu-ray back there, but it never occurs to me to pop it in again and watch it. Maybe that's my oversight. I'm not really sure. But with DC, I have much stronger feelings related to the Snyderverse. I am a diehard Snyder fan. I like that grounded, gritty thing. I'm not into this bright, optimistic thing. If over time that vision had become an optimistic thing as obstacles and growth and, sort of Campbell's The Hero's journey is completed, which is what we were getting to with the Snyder Cut, that would have been one thing. But I really like those films, and I loved his casting. That brings me to Ezra Miller, who was one of Snyder's, primary castings. I mean, the primary are, Henry Cavill, Superman, Ben Affleck, Batman, Jason Momoa, Gal Gadot, Wonder Woman, and you've got Jason Momoa, Aquaman, and then Ezra. I think one of the weakest things about this film was Ezra Miller. I'm not sure that Ezra Miller is leading man quality. Ezra Miller in Zack Snyder's Justice League is a good supporting, or he's an okay supporting character, and he provided good comic relief. To have him in front of in front as the leading man for 2 hours plus was a bit much. I decided on impulse to watch this because it's just been so heavily, talked about that I said, I'm just going to sit down in the theater and make up my own mind. And so I went to an 11 o'clock feature. About 30 minutes later, it kicks off because now you're stuck with all the previews. And then closer to 2 o'clock, something along those lines, I walked out. This is a movie that was announced before BVS dropped. So what is that, 2016, 2017, something along those lines? So this has been in some form of production for a very long time. My opinion of it is that it felt very spliced together. There are probably 2 or 3 other movies, and I've heard other reviewers say this isn't my original idea, but there probably are 2 or 3 other Flash movies on the floor somewhere. Snyder Cut, Ayer Cut, at some point, I think even Robert Zemeckis took a look at this, and he knows a little bit about you know, time travel films with Back to the Future. Here's the thing. Again, you know, it has a very, very uneven feel. It goes from, at some points, from being ridiculously comic, and it had this incessant sort of quirky Ezra Miller slapsticky kind of thing going, and then it would revert to this ultra dark, almost Snyder-like thing by the time we get to the Zod storyline, leading, you know, we've already been introduced to Michael Keaton's Batman, so on and so forth. And then it reverts back, and it sort of moves back and forth, you know, and tries to be poignant. I'm not sure Ezra Miller, again, like I said, was the right person for this casting. As a support character, again, fine. For 2 hours of him, it was a lot. It was a lot to deal with. Let's take a look. I'm going to start getting into some of the spoilers here. So if you want to duck out of here and catch the review later, here's what I would say before we begin. Go see the movie and make up your own mind. One of the things that I've sort of gotten tired of, and I'm very stingy with praise, but even by my standards, we've gotten into this thing, especially with social media, and, you know, everyone with a channel becomes their own, you know, movie critic, becomes their own Roger Ebert, so to speak, their own Gene Siskel, is that, you know, there's no room except for one choice or the other. You know, you either love something and then 6 months, you know, or you can't wait for it, so on and so forth. And, you know, that's kind of what I grew up remembering. You know, you were looking forward to this next movie, so on and so forth. But then on the other side, you've got people who 6 months before something even drops will come out and tell you, you know, this is dead on arrival, you know, because, you know, things leak now, so on and so forth. I had an experience with a channel bounding in the comics. They were Zack Snyder's Rebel Moon, you know, dead on arrival. The movie doesn't even, I don't think the movie drops until December or late November. This was about 2 weeks ago. Dead on arrival. And I'm like, how the fuck can it be dead on arrival? It didn't even. So I look into the article and it says Zack Snyder's Rebel Moon, you know, dead on arrival, non-binary character is in it. And that's why. And that would have been fine. But then they started bringing quotes from the church or religion into it as to why non-binary is unacceptable in terms of, you know, Christian faith and so on and so forth. I think that's a bit much. That's kind of small dick shit, if you ask me. If you don't like a movie, and there are tons of movies I don't like, and I'll tell you to your face I don't like it, but I'm not going to start getting into religion or, you know, my religious beliefs as to why you should not spend your money to watch it. So I said, you know, in a response to this, you know, how are you going to enforce this? You know, because if you're taking this stance now, then anyone who's divorced, anyone who's having any character who's, I mean, I'm talking about movie characters, any movie characters who's divorced, had sex outside of marriage, you know, is gay. You're going to have to tell your audience to tank them, you know, and to boycott those movies. You're going to have like 10 movies left to watch. But I said, if you want to go tell your audience that, go right ahead. I'll be, you know, pleased to watch that happen. I'll wait. And he ended up blocking me. So we've gotten into this thing where, you know, 6 months before we even see a teaser, people are saying these things are dead on arrival. And I want Hollywood to change. I want Hollywood to get better. I'm not interested in having Hollywood fall apart and fall into the ocean. That doesn't interest me. So I took my money and went to see it, made up my own mind. I'm going to start off with the spoilers now. So if you want to bolt, here we go. Here we go with The Flash. So one of the things that you know, one of the faults that I sort of had with this was that there was some inconsistency in the storylines. It starts out where and if you have followed this, you know, thing with the DCEU, you know that the Flash requires a lot of calories. No problem. You know, it starts out very much, you know, he's got some sort of like wrist monitor on, like a Garmin or something like that. And, you know, I'm, you know, starving and I got, you know, critical. I got to get calories. He's burning so many calories, so on and so forth. It becomes like the first 5 or so 10 minutes of the movie. Let's say the first 10 minutes of the movie are kind of about him struggling to get something to eat. And then a crisis breaks out, which I'm not going to bother to get into. So you think, okay, well, that's going to be a major part of if you're going to take 10 minutes to explain this, then that's going to be part of the story throughout. It's never brought up again. So that's an example of what I mean about things being really uneven and vacillating from, one thing that they concentrate on and just never touch on that storyline again. There's an action scene afterwards that brings Ben Affleck's Batman into it. I like that scene a lot. It's great to see Ben Affleck, the Batfleck, up there again, doing his thing. Really good action scene with the Bat Pod and the Bat Jet and, all these sorts of things. Yeah, he's operating in daylight, but I didn't have a problem with it. They also bring into that scene Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman, and it's great to see her again. There are some comedic scenes because, of course, it's the Flash, and it carries a sort of comedic tone because Ezra Miller I guess they feel he operates best, and that's how they've set him up to be this sort of buffoon who has powers. She saves people with the golden lasso, and there's some comic admissions from Batman, so on and so forth. It was okay. I chuckled a little bit. It was not a problem. You do come back, though, and they do make mention of Zack Snyder's Justice League and some of the things that happened specifically in that Justice League versus Joss Whedon. And at several times throughout the movie, I had a distinct wish that Zack Snyder had taken on this, because I think he would have done a much better job. No offense to Andy Muschietti. I enjoyed the first of the 2 It movies. The second movie, I thought it fell apart, but then I'm hearing, maybe he was overruled by the producers. Here, it seems that he's trying, but yeah, there's some comic stuff. Some people tried to pick that apart. I didn't necessarily have a problem with it because, it's not a documentary. It's a comic book movie. And if I'm really going to start to break things down that far, I'm going to have to, point out the fact that there are no actual Amazons and that people can't actually run at the speed of light. So, I'm not going to pick that much Nat shit out of Pepper. We also get to see that the Flash has some new powers. He can phase and sort of walk through things like Kitty Pryde from the X-Men. And so that's kind of cool to see that, he's learning to do some new things. The CGI is an issue unto itself. The CGI is bad, for lack of a better term, because we're spending a lot of time in the Speed Force. And I don't know exactly what the problem is. Muschietti said that, he wanted to look at what Barry saw inside the Speed Force. What it sort of looks like is that after 3 reshoots, and I'm only speculating, I don't know that this is actually true. It looks like Warner Brothers finally said, look, this is it. We're finished. Cut it and wrap. And we're done here. We're not doing any more reshoots. We're not doing any more, polishings. This is supposed to be, I think, the most expensive film in history, $250 to $300 million, maybe more. So they may have just at some point said, look, we can't deal with this anymore. We've got James Gunn taking over, and, that's just the way it's going to have to be. The CGI inside the Speed Force, there were a couple of scenes in there where it did look like the Scorpion King. It was that level of CGI. You're like, wow, this is bad. They didn't focus on those scenes very much with lengthy action, like at the end of the Scorpion King. But yeah, it could have been better, especially when we saw what Snyder did with the Justice League and Barry spending time in the Speed Force. That definitely could have been better. Barry, and then we get to Ezra Miller himself as the lead, who just sort of plays it like a 13-year-old. He plays it like as someone whose prefrontal cortex is not developed. And if you've been around 13-year-olds, that's kind of how they all are. They just kind of do things and say things. And in limited pockets, that works. And that's why I said I think he works as a supporting character in the overall DCEU. But here, just line after line after line of impulse, 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 just blurting and blurting. It got to be a lot. It got to be a lot. We get to the part where we find out that he has accidentally gone back in time, develops the idea that I could go back in time and save he can go back in time and save his mother. So he does. But that brings, which, is a noble enough effort, even though he's warned by Ben Affleck, you could really wreck a lot of things. What ends up happening is that at this point, and this is no spoiler, we get stuck with two Ezra Millers. And so you've got the one Ezra Miller who is the Flash, and then you meet this other Ezra Miller who is 18 and has not gotten his powers yet. And so if I describe the one Ezra Miller as a 13-year-old, then the other must be like a 12-year-old. He's even worse. And for large portions of the movie, I really just found myself dipping my head down. I'm like, oh my God, I can't take any more of this. Just please stop. Two Ezra Millers, one acting like the usual Ezra Miller, the other one acting even worse with the grins and these frozen sort of expressions and that high-pitched laugh. It was a lot to deal with. We find out in this, because what's actually happened is he hasn't necessarily gone back in time. He's created a multiverse. So he's gone into like a parallel Earth at the time that Zod arrives from Man of Steel. And here's where the movie starts to get fun, because everything that I've described up until now is about an hour's worth of the movie. And some parts are better than others. Like I said, Ben Affleck, Gal Gadot, seeing them, that's good, so on and so forth. But a lot of it the rest of it kind of has to be endured. By the time we get to the Zod storyline, you're like, finally things start to pick up. And that's where the movie sort of flips and becomes almost a Snyder type movie. Zod is there. And we find out that, the two Barrys are now going to have to look for metahumans. At this time, through another scene, he actually gets Barry to the place where he absorbs his powers, because you're left under the impression that in this universe, this Barry would not have received any powers. So one has the power, and the original Barry loses his power. It's kind of all over the place. I don't know what the significance was necessarily of making the original Barry from our timeline, so to speak, lose his power, but that's what they ended up doing. So they end up looking for metahumans. Cyborg hasn't been created yet. There is no Arthur Curry in this universe. Gal Gadot, Wonder Woman, is untraceable. And they're trying to look for Clark Kent, but they don't know where to start necessarily. And so what they find out is that there is, of course, a Bruce Wayne. We get to Wayne Manor, and this is where it starts to become genuine fun. They actually bring back a lot of the scenes from the '89 Burton Batman. The house, with the long table, and it kind of has that Burton-y sort of feel. I should say, I was 20 years old when Burton's Batman dropped. I was a big fan of it at the time. Looking at it now, over 30 years later, 34, 35 years later, I see it kind of for what it is, which is a campy comedy. But to bring it back in this context with a lot more potential, I enjoyed it very much. They meet up with Michael Keaton, who they who, has no idea about the metahuman theory. And they proceed to try to find what they believe is Clark Kent, who is being held, that the ship has dropped in Russia instead of Kansas, and that Cal or Clark or, Superman is being held in some sort of Russian prison. When they get to the Russian prison, the two Barrys and Superman, there's some decent action. You get to see Michael Keaton do more than he was able to do in 1989 and 1992. Some pretty good action. I have my criticisms of Michael Keaton. Maybe they're not fair, but I always say, Batman is not 5'6". Batman is a big hulking guy. But here, you really don't seem to notice, and it is very enjoyable. The overall tone of the film is not serious, and there's less than half where it sort of does get serious, where they bring this person that they rescue out of the prison, who turns out to be Supergirl. It turns out, you find out that Clark never made it to Earth in this particular universe. He was found by Zod as a baby, and Zod killed him. So that's an interesting take. He never becomes Superman. He never makes it to Earth. He's captured by Zod, and Zod is trying to extract that Kryptonian DNA that was prevalent in Man of Steel. Here, it's Kara, I believe it's Kara-El, who is holding the DNA of all the Kryptonians that Zod is looking for. This, to me, was the best part of the film. You've got Batman, you've got Supergirl, you've got the two Barrys, basically in that place in Man of Steel where they are duking it out with the army in the desert. I thought it was great action. Supergirl is not at full power because she has been held in darkness. And as a I guess from the time she was a baby, has been held in darkness. She has not allowed to experience any of the powers of the yellow sun. So she's emaciated. She comes back to life fairly quickly, but she's not at full power. I thought the action was pretty damn good. It's not necessarily as dark as it was in Man of Steel, but it was pretty damn good. I liked Sasha Calle. I should say that right away. I liked her a lot as Supergirl. I also think she's smoking fucking hot. And I love that haircut that she has, and that all works for me. But what ends up happening is that fate sort of takes over, because there's always this argument that there are only so many things you can change, even going backwards in time. Some things are meant to be. And basically, Sasha Calle dies in the fight against Zod. Michael Keaton's Batman dies in the fight against Zod. There are several attempts for the newly empowered Flash from that particular universe to go back in time, which sort of develops its own storyline where he never learns the lesson that there are some things you just can't change. Some things are just destined to be. And it creates what I felt was largely an unnecessary thread, which is where all the cameos come in. And if you know, Nick Cage Superman, George Reeves Superman, Christopher Reeves Superman, Helen Slater Supergirl, I can't even remember how many others. I thought that was just unnecessary. It was about 5 minutes of just cameos for their own sake. The storylines really didn't go anywhere. They didn't interact with any of these characters here. They certainly didn't interact with Zod. So I'm not exactly sure why that happened. I suppose it was just nostalgia bait, and I didn't really get much out of it. In the end, Barry ends up, from this universe, ends up dying. So there's only the Barry from our particular universe, you could say, who ends up going back and having to undo the thing that he had done, which is save his mom. He has to actually let his mom go and let his mom die. He comes back to our world, really sort of shell-shocked. That actually wasn't a bad scene. He didn't pull it off too badly because that quirky sort of thing actually lent to him being slightly PTSD'd. So it was okay. He comes back to the universe. We see a little bit of Iris West, is that her name? I will say this, and maybe it's unfair. I thought Iris in Zack Snyder's Justice League was smoking hot. I had not seen that girl before, so on and so forth. We see her, the same casting again, but she seems to have put on some weight because she's always, her face is a lot fatter, for lack of a better term, and she's always wearing that heavy overcoat that she was sort of wearing in the first movie, but pulling off a lot better. Hold on one second, please. I sneeze. Okay, so he comes back to this universe, and he meets up with Bruce. He calls him on the phone. Bruce says, oh, you know, I'm pulling up right now to the courthouse, because he does manage to spring his dad. What this ends up doing, I don't know if it's inadvertent by letting his mom go. There's new evidence that ends up releasing his father. So that happens. He calls Bruce on the phone. Bruce says, I'm pulling up right now. And it turns out to be George Clooney. So Bruce Wayne is George Clooney. I don't know if that means that Andy Muschietti's Batman, The Brave and the Bold, is that what it's called, is going to recast George Clooney or whatever, but that's kind of how the movie ends. So I don't know if that means that this Flash is in another universe. I'm not exactly sure what that means, because, you know, that's where things sort of cut off. And that's the movie, basically. I mean, long story short, again, this film, very uneven. Very uneven. Some parts really good, some parts insufferable. CGI was not great. Yeah, I mean, some parts of the CGI were okay. Many parts of the Speed Force CGI were the worst parts. The parts that I saw with, you know, Sasha Calle and the fight against Zod, they worked out okay for me. If they were, I wasn't, you know, nitpicking it that much. Yeah, that's kind of it. I don't think Ezra Miller makes a great leading man. I don't know. It doesn't seem like there's any Flash in the near future in James Gunn's universe. I'll say this in advance. I really don't have any interest in James Gunn's universe, and maybe that sounds unfair given what I was saying about binary reactions at the beginning of this video, but I know what types of movies James Gunn makes, and that's not necessarily the types of movies that I'm interested in. What I enjoyed in this movie were the darker parts, the action parts, the Zod, Michael Shannon coming back. It was good to see him again. He didn't, you know, he's only in it for a short period. Sasha Calle is only in it for a short period. Michael Keaton's only in it for a short period, but those were the best parts of the film. I did enjoy Ben Affleck. He was in it. I enjoyed Gal Gadot, but they were all in it, interspersed for short little periods of time. I rate movies on a scale of 0 to 5. So 0, and they go up by halves. So 0, 0.5, 1, 1.5, all the way to 5. So 0, for example, would be, I'd rather pick my nose with aluminum foil wrapped around my finger than watch this movie again, all the way to 5. I'm going to give this movie, and maybe this is generous, but I'm going to give it, oh boy. I started out in saying, you know, I'm going to stick with what I said. I'm going to give it a 3.5. I feel that my 3.5, having discussed it, you know, this way, and I might be coming back in a couple of days with a panel discussion on it. But right now, I'm going with 3.5. It was better than Black Adam, and I think I gave Black Adam a 3 out of 5. It was better than Black Adam. I really liked. There were small pieces of Ezra Miller that I actually liked. There's one reference where he seemed the Ezra Miller from the second universe seems to be more confident than this Ezra Miller, although he's equally annoying. And I enjoyed certain parts with that, references that maybe he and Supergirl will have children one day, this, that, and the other. Again, and all the other overlaps from previous Batmans and DC films that I enjoyed. Not that cameo scene, but that made up for a lot. If they had not been in here, this would have been maybe a 1.5. So it's the people other than Ezra Miller that actually bring it up 2 points. And that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. My advice to you, and my advice, I say this in complete seriousness, make up your own mind. Spend your money, go catch a matinee. You really are turning your brain off. It's one of those types of movies. It's not going to be Oppenheimer or anything like that. Go check it out. See what you think. Let me know. That's my review for this video. Like the video. If you're watching it, it helps a lot. It helps a lot with the traffic. It helps the channel to grow. It helps the interactions. Leave a comment. Tell me what you think about the movie. Do you like it? Do you think I'm, full of shit? It sucks. Subscribe to the channel. That's about it for me. I will be back. I might be covering a panel. I'm going to see if I can put a panel together on short notice for this movie on Monday night. That would be cool. I'd like to hear other people's opinions on it and their thoughts. And then Wednesday, I think Secret Invasion is dropping. And I'm burnt out on the MCU, but I'm kind of curious what they'll be doing with Samuel Jackson. I've seen a couple reviews already where people are like, fuck this, and they've seen it. I guess they're, professional, press or whatever. But I also think a lot of people have jumped on the bandwagon of, wanting Hollywood to crash. That's not what I want. I don't want the film industry in my country to crash. I want it to be better. It might dip down, but I absolutely do not want it to crash. I don't want the film industry in any country to crash, but certainly not my own. So, this idea that I think sometimes, and I saw some reviews like this over the past couple of days where people just, they go in there, or it seems to me, this is just my opinion, it seems to me they go in there with their mind already made up. And from there, it's just, what little things can I nitpick here, there, and just, constantly take it down. And again, I just conclude by saying there are far worse films out there that are probably getting dragged a lot less than this one. Okay, that's my video. Again, thank you very much, and we'll see you in the next one. All right, take care.